So, we had some technical problems, sorry. I hope we're now online. So, I'm Panayotis from YU, and we have together with us Mr. Brando Benifei, MEP at the European Parliament. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
We're here together thanks to WYRED project, and we're going to discuss the digital society and how to engage and empower young people. And I would like to start our conversation with the question on how do we really engage and empower young people when it comes to this discussion?
Well, I think it's a very important topic. As a co-chair of the Youth Intergroup, I work with youth organizations about engagement of young people also through digital instruments. It's not just a matter of employment opportunities, learning competences for digital jobs. This is the kind of rhetoric sometimes we hear from some institutions. It's broader than that. It's about being citizens in today's complex and changing society. It's becoming more and more important to be digitally savvy, to be conscious on what is happening around you. I mean, recently we had such a heated debate in the European Parliament. Many people followed it through different media. There was a lot of attention, for example, about the change in the copyright directive. But also when we talk about the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, or when we talk about the issue of the protection of our privacy on the internet. Well, all these issues, they are not strictly related only to, okay, having digital competences for your future job. That's important, okay? But we are talking about how you can be a conscious and prepared digital citizen. I think this must be one of our focus. We need to convince young people that we can help, and we need to put the instruments on the table that can help young people to be more digitally savvy. Because I want to go against one obvious bias that they say, okay, young people are digital natives. It's easy for them to be updated on what's happening in terms of digital competences, also to understand how data is managed. I'm not sure it's true. I think that digital natives, okay, have some advantage compared to older generations, but they need proper education on digital issues. As I said, not just for work, but also for their daily life. I think it's a democratic objective. Also, to conclude on the point, for participating. We know that many new political movements are working on this. I think it's an important topic that we develop new ways of participating, expressing our opinions, voting through online platforms. Again, to use them effectively, you need to learn about them. You need to be educated about them.
Well, just to remind our viewers, we're live at the Parliament. Being here doesn't make it kind of distant. You can post your questions, your remarks, any comments you would like to share with Mr. Benifei. We're here to discuss with you as well, so feel free to comment. So, coming back to us. Through our project, there was a process in the first cycle that a lot of young people went through their research and came with some recommendations. And we kind of see the relation of several topics actually highlighting the need to be included as young people within policy, highlighting the need to have the digital means within education, within employment, having the aspect of no borders in between and communication. There were also, as I recall from Austrian group, there was a research about food sustainability in connection to the research taking place. So how do you think that actions like this, evidence-based processes of young people can actually be used by policymakers? How can we open channels in national level, like in the case of Italy, or in the European Parliament? Because I know that the Parliament opens discussions, points to collaborate with people and organizations.
The European Parliament already has experienced some activities in this sense. I can mention especially one experiment called Debating Europe that has been going on for some time, involving young people in small online dialogues that were connected one with the other. So I think it was a path that started and must be developed, especially as we look forward next European elections, to build a debate on what has been this mandate for the European Parliament and what can be happening in the next time. It's true that we need to exploit more a connection between civil society, youth movements, what they do already, and national authorities. I think that we need to invest more in this. We need to invest some public money. When we look at the money that, is, we can say, put there for supporting democratic empowerment initiatives, supporting civil society. Each member state does that in different ways. I think we need a specific focus of part of these resources to support experiments regarding direct engagement of citizens through digital instruments. Very, very simply, I can make a very, very, really, we can say very simple example. For example, debates that today started using, I've seen that also at the recent European Youth event being used, and also in other contexts, of instant polling through instruments like Slido. I think that's a small thing, but it's something that is using also a direct interaction through digital instruments to make a very basic, very traditional debate like the ones that we do in political seminars, more interactive and more dynamic. Obviously, when I talk about support and exchange of good practices and also resources being spent at a state or in general institutional level with the youth organizations, I'm talking obviously at bigger projects that I think are needed today. I think we need to develop platforms that can really ask young people what they want from democratic politics, because today we need still to, after a period also of economic crisis, of a lot of, I would say, distrust between the young people and institutions, we need to regain trust in institutions of young people, regardless of our political leanings, through some direct engagement that also asks them what do they want by their representatives. Because as a supporter myself of representative democracy, I don't believe that we can just go for just direct democracy. The direct democracy instruments also through digital platforms are useful complements to representative democracy. We need to, however, be able to reconnect representatives to people and especially to young people, because today we have many people that asked, young people on the street, they would tell you, but why do we need parliaments? Why don't we just have one person that decides for all? We have this tendency, this way of reasoning growing, and I think it's a problem, because I think that democracy must be supported and must be made stronger by participation. And so we need to also update the ways we participate.
Thank you very much. I'm kind of laughing a bit because we do have our first questions. Thank you, Ioana, for joining us. And the question of Ioana is, to what extent the policy recommendations are being made as a result of the youth projects? I guess she means the WYRED project results. I'll change the question a bit. Can be taken into consideration by the MEPs and the European Parliament in general. How if we're in the process of sharing you the results, how do you think that these recommendations passing from WYRED projects could actually be used by you?
Well, it's a good question, because there is always the risk of not having a real follow-up of these projects. So I can tell you that myself, I always try to include results I get from dissemination meetings that we have with the youth organizations at the end of projects being put forward. I try to do it, and I would say that many colleagues, I've seen it myself, are really serious in trying to include outcomes in political reports or legislative files. I give you an example. When I worked on the Solidarity Core, I tried to include as much as possible of the recommendations regarding traineeships, quality framework for traineeships, council recommendation, into all the legislative part of the Solidarity Core, that has a part that is not just volunteering, as a part that is traineeships and jobs, and so they need to also have the strongest possible safeguards for young people working, in this case, in projects for solidarity. And this comes from a work that has been done with the European Youth Forum, with organizations like Youth for Exchange and Understanding and others, on how to strengthen safeguards for young people in the transition between education and starting a job career, a work career. We have found very useful to have a continuous dialogue with youth stakeholders. My suggestion, as there is also a question about how to improve strategies for reaching out to stakeholders, is, in my opinion, is to participate, to be active, to be there. Because generally, if you are a bit loud, everyone will listen at least a bit. Also those who are not immediately willing to do it. But my suggestion is that young people don't restrain themselves in also being very direct, sometimes blunt, in asking for adequate consideration of their views. So my suggestion is to be there, to be active, to be loud, to be inquiring, because we need that. We need young people to do that. And this way, stakeholders, and especially political ones, elected representatives, will have some necessity in the end to give some answers. And also the social networks, the way today debate is framed, is shaped also by these instruments. I think it can be also a kind of push to especially politicians that cannot avoid answering when you have a question for them on a social network, for example. There is a lot of exposure. It's not like that in the past. It was not like that in the past. Today, there is a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways to really get the attention of legislators and stakeholders in general. I think that the best suggestion is just go on pushing, go on pressuring. It's possible today to do it better than the past. Just do it.
Very nice. Just connecting a little bit the questions and seeing also what you're saying. I want to comment that you heard Mr. Benifei saying that approach us, we're going to go through the project. So as part of why you will collect all the results, because we have a report with all the recommendations and conclusions, and we're going to share them with you, expecting that you're going to as well enrich the intergroups you're part of with the ideas of young people and also votings in the European Parliament. However, through WYRED project, what I have understood personally and through the partnership is that it is very important to engage young people even earlier than the average plus 18 young people that have the possibilities to engage. What we understood from WYRED project is that we have engaged children and minors, and they're actually as passionate as what we consider active citizens above 18, that they have voting rights, etc. So active citizenship should be part of education from early years. What is your opinion about empowering this specific age group, like children, into becoming leading the way, let's say, of policy and actually creating a future which is better for them?
Yeah, my opinion is that it's crucial that you involve with political education at large, we can say civic education, young people at the age of 14, 15, 16, 17, so before the 18 age.
Even earlier? Do you think it will be?
Yeah, I mean, even earlier, but especially for teenagers, I think even earlier you can, for example, educate to discussion, to critical thinking, to try to solve issues and discussions with their peers, the other pupils, with a dialogue. So that's already something. But then, especially in teenage, I think it's the moment where you can build a conscious citizen, someone who has its own views, that is not manipulated by anyone, that is able to understand how to build its own opinion on things. This needs to be supported by having some specific competences that you can learn by doing, by participating with youth organizations. I think that remains crucial, but also at school, you need specific education for political, civil education. I think it's something that must be pushed more and more in member states. Some are doing a bit more than others, but at European level, unfortunately, we don't have a direct competence to act on that, but we can, as we are doing already, support and stimulate that. Now there is a discussion with the Commission going on about the European dimension of teaching, that in our opinion as parliamentarians we need to put into that recommendation of the Commission a clear message regarding education on European democracy and in general institutions that need to be known by young people. We need them to be able to understand how their representative democracy works before they become voting people, because today they end up being reaching the voting age without having had really any education on what they will be voting about. And obviously it's not just about voting, it's about learning, again, as you said, critical thinking, how to have meaningful participation. And I think that we cannot just leave this to like family tradition, people that have maybe people from their close circle that can give them this kind of approach to society. They need to be given instruments by institutions, schools, and by working with youth organizations that need to be supported specifically for these objectives.
I think from our behalf, there's a lot of processes that support non-formal and informal learning when it comes to these topics. As, for example, this project that we also have formal education institutes like University of Salamanca and some other organizations like Toga schools in Turkey. You get to see that there is a variety.
Yeah, we need to combine both formal and informal education.
It should be the same when it comes to active citizenship and civic education. Going back to the European Youth Event, when we had our first conversation about growing up on digital society, a lot of people were actually a little bit afraid of how this digital society is developing or leading up on a way that they actually don't know what is going on. They're not participating in policy. How do you see yourself covering these fears as a legislator? How do you see controlling the digital society or bringing the discussion openly to people can actually cover that fear or even diminish it?
Well, I think that it's important that we don't underestimate the risks of digital society today. It's clear that we have a complicated ongoing balance of job creation and job destruction, new threats to security, and also new opportunities for empowerment of citizens. It's always a balance of different things. So we need to have a rational approach. Parliament is also trying to be a bit in the avant-garde, European Parliament, for example, by working on new norms for robots, or new regulatory challenges regarding artificial intelligence. So we need to play our cards as legislators to try to anticipate issues and to try to guide this digital transition. Obviously, this needs also a change in terms of support policies for people, but also I think that it's important. One thing that I've read here as a
there are a lot of questions, by the way.
I connect to one of those.
Yes.
To try to locate, these kind of debates of big issues into also the impact they have on a local level. I give you an example on a different topic that for me is a very, very easy example. That is the issue when we talk about fighting against climate change, which is also something that has a connection with new technology, innovation, and digital, because new digital instruments are used to fight against climate change. Why I'm saying this is a very global, even not even European, but world debate that has a strong relation with local issues. And so, as it was asked now, how can we connect the different dimensions and local level? Well, when we talk about climate change, we are talking about a change of environment that, with small changes in terms of temperature, it can hugely impact the balance of ecosystems and the resilience of fragile territories. I come from Italy, which has a lot of hydrogeological risks that are in terms of floods, in terms of crumbling of hills. That's very much connected with the fragile balance of the ecosystem, and that's connected to the climate change, which is a totally global issue, but it has a strong impact at local level. I just wanted to make this example because, in my opinion, it's very, very obvious and very, very clear. So we need to tell, as it's asked, what to tell the teenagers and to tell young people that when we deal about these huge, faraway issues that are discussed at the UN level, in the end we are discussing, and we have a role to play as Europe on issues that have an immediate direct impact in their life, and they need to consider that when they think what is important to be discussed and decided.
There's another question. First of all, thank you for answering the question of Ocean. And I have another question from Anton. He says a lot of young people didn't understand why they need to participate in training courses, volunteering programs, etc. I think he's saying about people when they're being invited to participate. What advices would you give to motivate these people to be active
it's
citizens?
A good question. My opinion is that you cannot force people to do these things. So there are people who just don't want to do it, and we can try to convince, and it's good that we try to convince people of the importance of doing these kind of activities, also for their future, but we should not just force people. On one hand, we can also give a more, we can say, utilitaristic approach, like saying that, for example, participating in training courses, volunteering, informal learning, you get competences that can be also used for your job career. And so we can say a bit narrow perspective, but that must be also considered. Generally, I am skeptical that the problem is mainly about people that don't want to participate in active citizenship learning programs. Rather, the main problem is their accessibility of these programs, because many people just don't know they exist. They don't know what is for them there. They don't know how important they can be, how good they can be for their life. So, in my opinion, there is a lot to do about explaining about information and giving a clear understanding of what can be achieved in terms of personal development, of having, values put in, ideal values put in practice by doing volunteering. I think we need to do that, but I think that's really important. And also, when I say to make it known and accessible, I'm also talking about resources. We need to make these activities accessible and understood and possible for people with different backgrounds. For example, a problem that we have is that not all member states today have a real national support program for volunteering, for informal learning. And also, we need to be very careful often when we deal with European programs. I also had to consider that while discussing what kind of international element to keep in the Solidarity Core report. We need to avoid giving wrong incentives to member states to not develop their own national strategies, just waiting for Europe and with European money to give a bit of support to volunteering. We need to, especially if I look at the Eastern European countries, most of them, they still don't have a real system of supporting these activities, and they need to be pushed and they need to be incentivized in doing it on all of them, not just having the idea that we have European money and European programs like the European volunteering system to just be a substitute for national initiatives on that.
Being in a youth organization, I understand the points you're making, and also Adeola also agrees with the part of accessibility and awareness. And Ocean comes with a second question saying that, do you think those youth activities can play a key role in the inclusion of migrant children to share European values and skill acquisition?
That's a very good.
Just to add with the question, because we're moving a little bit away from the digital space, with this,
but I will get into digital again.
Just to build up and being a little bit provocative, do you think these questions that they're asking also connect to the digital information that institutions share? Are they enough? Are they confusing? Are they overloading with information and taking out of the importance, as Ocean says, of this, what they're for?
Well, the general point on what you just said is that the digital communication that is being done by institutions, especially the European institutions, is still not the best possible. We need to work on that because we still don't reach all people that we need to reach. Many people ask me things that I show them they can easily find on, for example, institutional websites. But in the end, if they ask me, it means that they don't have an immediate thought of how to find them. So we need to also ameliorate digital communication for sure. If we look at European institutions, there has been investment on that. I appreciate some recent initiatives like You and Me campaign that has been, I think, quite effective in explaining how everyday life is influenced by European Union and its policies in really daily activities. So not just the Europe of traveling, of mobility, of the cosmopolitan Europe, the Europe of living in your neighborhood and what's happening there locally by being a European citizen, by being inside the European Union. Then, if we look at the specific issue of migrant children integration, in my opinion, as rapporteur on integration of refugees and in the society and labor market for the European Parliament, my report was approved in the plenary in 2016 in July. I've been working especially on this topic, on the fact that migrant children, especially in that report, we focus on asylum seekers and refugees children. They are the easiest to integrate, much more than older people in new receiving hosting societies. So it's especially important to invest in their inclusion because it's easier for us to include and fully integrate them. And why I said I can get back to digital issues, because we looked into that when I was rapporteur on the topic. Digital instruments can be extremely important to reach this objective. We have seen digital portals, digital matching instruments. In the question, youth activities are mentioned, especially. Yes, to have local young people meet asylum seekers, migrants, young people, have a kind of piloted matching and system of exchange and meeting. We have seen a development of these instruments that have brought some positive outcomes. And this is also used for one reason, that that especially if we look at asylum seekers, they often have smartphones coming from where they come from, and this has been also a matter of political fights. People from some political forces say, but these people, they come with a smartphone. Well, that's something they need to keep contact with the place they're coming from. And instead of making a fuss about the fact that people that in fact don't own anything else, very often they have still a mean to be connected, it's instead not something to be debated badly, but it should be considered as an opportunity, because with that you can communicate also in a different way about rights, duties, opportunities, through these digital instruments I mentioned, but also by digital portals about how to find assistance, linguistic resources, and training. Exactly. And I mean, we have seen that being done privately with private organizations, NGOs, but also by governments, like the Uncommon app by German government. And so we have seen the development of digital instruments in an effective way with good practices to really boost youth activities connected and directed to young migrant children, etc.
Just to be a little bit more provocative, by the way, we have around 5 more minutes, so please try to share any last questions or comments with us. And I really understand that your schedule is very tight, so thank you once more for joining us. I want to make a question because we're tackling all this participation and engagement and empowerment of young people and children, and now is the discussion of MMF when it comes to the youth program as well. You have Erasmus Plus, new program post 2020. How do you think topics and issues covered by young people now could actually be at the core of financing by the EU and the member states when it comes to the youth programs and civil society supporting initiatives to support as well marginalized youth groups that they don't really have access in this program? Supposedly with the European Solidarity Corps, we have a higher access of numbers. But how do you think these two processes can actually link the engagement of young people in order to have a more youth up union and a more participatory union?
Right. Well, I can give, we could talk for hours about this, but I can give 2 observations on what is on the table now on the MFF, on the multi-annual financial framework for the next period. One is that there is already a focus coming from the initial proposal by the Commission. We would like to have more. We will push for more, for sure. But we already have an increase on the Erasmus money, on the possibility for Erasmus Plus programs that are useful for twinning, for exchanges between youth organizations. We have seen many activities useful on the topics that we touched in this discussion, also on regarding programs that include the digital dimension of democratic engagement, funded through Erasmus+. Now we can have more opportunities. I think we need to continue supporting Erasmus Plus development. Then when we talk about social inclusion, more specifically, I am the S&D rapporteur for the European Social Fund Plus. So I've been working already on the text for the new regulation regarding the European Social Fund, and we had we have into that a special focus on social inclusion. Much more than before. There is a series of provisions, and we will look into that more in the next months with the parliamentary procedure to strengthen the accessibility and the inclusion of marginalized groups into programs, into also training opportunities, volunteering, access to instruments for job inclusion like the Youth Guarantee. And again, if we talk about digital, we have attention. It's something we discussed recently also at the Digital Assembly in Sofia, that when we look at the social inclusion dimension, also digital inclusion is included in the, sorry for the repetition, into the criteria. So bridging the digital divide, giving digital competences, it's all there. So inclusion includes also being able to have access to digital opportunities. I think this is important, and I think that we need to keep this focus there. Also, when we look at, again, measures for inclusion, the skills guarantee, that is this instrument to be funded by structural funds to give minimum level of skills to people that didn't complete higher education, also adults, not just young people, in three main fields: linguistic competences, mathematical competences, and digital competences as a minimum level of alphabetization. I think it's an important approach. It's correct that we need to give everyone, at least also those who didn't have possibility for a series of reasons, and we want them to be less and less, but people that didn't have the possibility in the end to have even a complete higher education, to have instruments that can can give them minimal competences level.
Well, 2 more minutes. I would like, just to close from my side, thank you on behalf of YU and the partnership. For you as viewers and young people or children or whoever is watching, you can find out more about the WYRED project on wiredproject.eu, and feel free to contact us to engage. And moving on, as we have no further questions and comments, in a minute, could you please tell us your last comment about how young people can reach you, how people working with young people and children can actually reach you as we did right now, to actually offer them a possibility to be heard and to be engaged and empowered?
Well, it's a good question. The truth is that we are very easily reachable, in the sense that if you look for me on the search engines or wherever, on the internet, you can very easily find me. Brando Benifei, you find all my contacts. I'm also on the social networks. The European Parliament is even in itself on Snapchat. So, I mean, the Parliament as a whole, and each of us, me included, are easily reachable. Then, there are colleagues who don't answer very much, and they try to just maybe sometimes just ignore some communication. That's not good, and I know they are not so many. The majority of us are very keen also to answer, to be there, and so feel free to contact us directly, to contact me directly, and we can also continue this discussion together in the future, also on different topics.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Valentina, for the invitation to Mr. Benifei.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today with us, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for viewing us. Thank you for being here with us. Have a nice afternoon, evening, and I hope we continue our collaboration in the future.
For sure.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Ciao.